The Gentle Art of Tramping, Chapter 7, Whither, Away. The principal motive of the wander spirit is curiosity, the desire to know what is beyond the next turning of the road, and to probe for oneself the mystery of the names of the places in the maps. In a subconscious way, the born wanderer is always expecting to come on something very wonderful, beyond the horizon's rim. The joys of wandering are often balanced by the pains, but there is something which is neither joy nor pain, which makes the desire to wander or explore almost incurable in many human beings. The child experiences his first wonder thrill when he is taken to places where he has never been before. I remember from the age of 9 a barefoot walk with my mother along the Lincolnshire sands from Sutton to Skegness, and the romantic and strange sights on the way. What did we not build out of that adventure? And who does not remember the pleasurable thrill, the pleasure that's all but pain, of being lost in a wood, or in a strange countryside, and meeting some crazy individual who humoured the idea by apostrophizing a little book in this style: "I am now marching upon the banks of the mighty Congo." The imagination wishes to be stirred with the romances of places, and is stirred. In a great city like London or New York, even though living there, certainly I, for one, am homesick, not for a home and an armchair, but for a rolling road and a stout pair of boots, and my own stick fire by the roadside at dawn, and the old pot which is slow to boil. Where, I am asked, would you go a-tramping now if you were absolutely fancy-free, and passports and Bolsheviks were unknown? It would probably be in Russia, where I have vagabondized over thousands of miles already. I should like to resume my 6,000-mile journey southwest to northwest, which was interrupted by the war in August 1914. But alas, the Moscow of the Bolsheviks does not encourage a venture of that kind. Again, I'd like to buy a boat at Perm and slip down the Pechura River, and go with the stream thousands of miles north, sailing the boat to the Samoyedes at the mouth of the river, thence tramping perhaps by the tundra roads or sledging it to Mensen. What a romance, what a journey, as it seems to me now, in complete inexperience of it. Or I'd like to take a party of writing men and women to the Altai, and in a verdant valley live for half a year without letters and newspapers, and each write his own book, express his own peculiar happiness in his own words. Or I'd like to plunge south from Vernay in Seven Rivers Land, or from the Kasgar, and climb to the mountain passes into India, and as I think of it, a sense of the last poem of Davison creeps into the memory. Alone I climb the rugged path that leads me out of time. So much for Russia. I'd love to tramp the whole length of Japan, and peer into all the ways of the modern Japanese. There, however, speaks another interest. And that is not so much to explore strange lands as to explore strange people. Life teaches the wanderer that peoples are extra pages to geography, and that the fascination can at times be irresistible. You long to be familiar with Russians, Frenchmen, Germans, Chinese, Arabs, Americans, and the rest. And it takes you afield. It takes you far, far away from Alpha Villas, or the sweet shady side of Pall Mall. I've long wished to wander for years, in the tents of the nomads of the central Mongolian plain. I came on them accidentally, tramping in Turkestan. I'm surely among the most interesting people in the world, and the oldest, with customs of the most intense human interest. Nothing less than a year with them would do, and that means a year without civilization, for no postman seeks the wandering tents of the Kirkskiz and the Kalmunk. I should like also to pursue a study which I once began of the monasteries of the Copts, and tramp in the Sahara Desert to follow the clues of early Christianity up the Nile from Alexandria and the Thebaid, and I make some study of Abyssinian Christianity in its natives' haunts. Or, on this other side of the world, I like to tramp the communal state of the Dokabels, of which I obtained a glimpse in the 1922 in Western Canada. Or I'd like just now to tramp as a beggar through the heart of the New Ireland. These and many other fascinating adventures haunt the mind like Maeterlinck's souls of the unborn children in that charming drama of the ideal, the betrothal. If I don't do them this time on earth, and can't do them, friends are apt to say, well, next time. One lifetime will hardly suffice to find out all there is to know, and to enjoy in the world, and in man. Vachel Lindsay, with whom I enjoyed a wonderful 6 weeks when we crossed Glacial Park, going by compass and past the frontier between the United States and Canada, is eager for a resumption of the trail. Next time it shall be Mount McKinley in Alaska, or Crater Lake in the far northwest of the States. Perhaps someday I'll go. Only recently I received from him, by one post, 6 long letters and a packet of coffee from going to the Sun Mountain. Come at once, said Vachel, but I was in Finland at the time. Otherwise I'd have flung off for Alaska or Crater Lake. The difficulty is to say no to such suggestion. It would be travelling more with nature than with man, through enormous wildernesses. Imagination could draw a wonderful picture of what such places would be like. But there is one crude, unmannerly truth that the traveller always comes upon in the course of his experience of new places. And that is that imagination, though very charming, is nearly always wrong. Knowledge of living detail shows the world to be full of the unexpected, and the unanticipated, the unimagined. There is a type of tramping which belongs more to the future, a new type, and an even more fascinating one, and that is the taking of cross-sections of the world. This can be tried, first of all, as a haphazard tramp, setting out to walk without the name of any place you want to get to, hence a zigzag walk, of which I write later. Keep taking the first turning on the left, and the next on the right, and see where it leads you. In towns this gives you a most alluring adventure. You get in all manner of obscure courts and alleys you would never have noticed in the ordinary way. But in the country, beaucoup zigzag, as they say in France, does not work. You get tied up in a hopeless tangle of lanes which go back upon themselves. As a result of a week's tramping, you may find yourself only 2 steps from the place you started from. You feel like a lost ant that after infinite trouble has got back to the heap. It is dull to be an ant. In the country, a real cross-section and haphazard adventurous tramp is one which can be known as trespassers' walk. You take with you a little compass, decide to go west or east, as fancy favours, and then keep resolutely to the guidance of the magnetic needle. It takes you the most extraordinary way, and shows what enormous amount of the face of the earth is kept away from the feet of ordinary humanity by the fact of private property. On the other side of the hedge that skirts the public way is a entirely different atmosphere and company. In 10 minutes, in our beautiful Sussex, you can find yourself as remote from ordinary familiar England as if you were in the midst of a great reservation, and you may tramp a whole day upon occasion without meeting a single human being. I want to do it in Russia sometime. Tramp across her by the compass, visit the hamlets which are 5 miles from the road, visit those which are 50 from the road, 150 from the road. In that way I should find a Russia as yet unknown, unrevealed. It would be a strange and fantastic quest of happiness. There is no sense in it, I can hear the stay-at-home repeat. And if he came with me, it would not be long before he parted company and went back. There's no sense in going further, and he is quite right if he doesn't hear the explorer's whisper in his heart. One everlasting whisper, day and night, repeated. So, something hidden. Go and find it. Go and look behind the ranges. Something lost behind the ranges, lost and waiting for you. Go. The Japanese question to the polar explorer, "What did you find when you got to the pole?" is a foolish one. You may bring nothing back in your hands from an expedition, but you have garnered within. You have garnered for yourself and also for others. It is also worthwhile to quit for a time the rabbit hutches of civilization and do something which stay-at-home folk call flying in the face of fortune. It is not comfortable enough where you are, they ask. However, tramping, as I am writing of it, is not polar exploration, nor footing it along the rocky ways of the mountains to Lhasa. It is a smaller, gentler matter. It is merely accepting the call of nature, taking 2 weeks which Wells describes in his Modern Utopia, and taking more. But it matters greatly where one chooses to go. Some countries are better than others, some districts better than other districts. England cannot be said to be an excellent tramping country. Very good for walking a tour where one seeks an inn each night, but not good for a tramp in which one hopes to sleep à la belle étoile. Even when the weather is fine, the dews are heavy. In the occasional dry, hot summers which occur it is, however, delightful to adventures forth in the West Country, or in Cumberland, or even in the Highlands. 1 or 2 jaunts are very attractive, for instance, to tramp the old Roman wall from Carlisle to Wallsend at Newcastle, or to tramp the Scottish border from Berwick to Solway. One passes over remarkably wild and desolate country. I think especially of the track from Jedburgh to Newcastleton, and a forlorn district called, if I remember rightly, Not of the Hill, which, however, is very much of the hill. One meets upon occasion uncouth, friendly mountain shepherds with plenty of philosophy in them. There are some wild tramps in Wales, especially in the marches. Shropshire border is interesting. If, however, one dives westward for places such as Dinas Mawadi or Dolgelly, one should take provisions for a couple of days. It is easy to lose yourself, and when you come upon people they speak only Welsh, and one has some trouble in making oneself understood. Dartmoor and Western Ireland and the mountains and coastways of Donegal afford remarkable scope for adventurers with pack on back. One ought to be very careful in Great Britain about wayside fires. Even when one is careful to put them out thoroughly with water before leaving, one is apt to get in trouble with the farmers, the police, etc. One should also remember that if found sleeping behind haystacks or in barns, one is liable to be hauled before the justice and charged with vagrancy. Not that the tramp needs to be ashamed when motorists appear there in strings charged with obstruction and speeding and the like. As a practical detail, however, it may be mentioned that sleepers are very rarely discovered. America is, of course, the tramp's paradise, a country made by tramps. I do not mean the hobos which infest the railroads today, but the Johnny Appleseeds of the time past, who went exploring beyond the horizon and the sunset. The first thing to be said about the New World is the enormous stretch and variety. Many people have walked 3,000 miles from New York to San Francisco. I even came across women who had done it in high-heeled boots. It is no novelty. A more difficult transcontinental jaunt would be the 4,000 miles of the unguarded line, the frontier of Canada and the United States. This is a good literary expedition, and anyone who did it and described it well would make his name. My friend Wilfred Ewart had it in mind to do, and he went prospectively over the details of such a vagabondage. But he was unfortunately killed in Mexico. Such a tramp would not be confined to frontier posts, but should be crisscross, now in the Republic, now in the Empire. Another tramp, which has seldom been done, except by labourers, is to follow the wheat harvest north from Texas. The harvesting starts in June in the south, and the great gangs of harvesters work northward with the summer. This implies a readiness to work in the fields. It is arduous, but a great experience. You garner wheat, you garner gold. If you take lifts when offered, you may get all the way to Oregon by September and find the corn still standing there. In America, however, the roads are killing. You can only tramp in early hours in the morning and the cool of the evening, at least in summer. The noon tide is too hot. Many cars throw up too much dust. Cross-country tramping is much happier and provides more adventures. But the man in the car is much more hospitable in America than any other part of the world. When tired of some waterless, treeless countryside, you can come on to the highway, hail a passing car, and be taken a long step further forward. The leisured and educated Americans do not tramp for pleasure and find some difficulty in understanding it. There's a well-known motto, "Why walk if you can ride?" And Americans without automobiles make their more fortunate brothers carry them. A hand wave from a pedestrian brings a car to a halt, and you jump in. Journeys have been made from New York to Los Angeles, Boston to New Orleans, stepping cars all the way. It is not to be recommended, however, as it is an abuse of a delightful hospitality. Still, unless you are studying American civilization, it is hardly worthwhile to tramp from town to town. The wildernesses are so much more interesting. It is worthwhile for anyone thinking out a novel walk to apply to the Department of Forests and National Parks at Washington. A national park, conventional as it sounds, may easily prove to be a reserve territory, as extensive as an English county. They are commonly referred to by propagandists as vast natural playgrounds, but as yet they are but little used. Yellowstone Park is the only one which is visited by great numbers of people. The others are in no way overrun. Indeed, the railway journeys to them are generally so long that the masses of the eastern cities cannot profit by them. There are two especially marvelous ones, Sequoia and Yosemite. Notable for their trees, the highest and the oldest trees in the world are to be found in these primeval wildernesses. The Grand Canyon can afford at least a week's walking. It is a mistake to go down it on horse or mule, and when down in the depths there is a marvelous journey for the pedestrian along the rocky flank of the fast-running Colorado River. If at Great Canyon in August, it is well to visit the Hopi Indians and see the snake dance. However, it is really better to visit the canyon later in the year. At Christmas it is delightful. At midsummer it is really too oppressive down below. When I went down there was snow above and soft vernal airs 3,000 feet under. Spring flowers in bloom, and one could sit happily by one's wood fire in the afternoon sunshine. Tramping in the south of the United States is very pleasant in autumn and spring, especially in Florida and Alabama. In the summer it is too hot, and mosquitoes unusually thick. A very interesting November tramp is from Atlanta, the largest city in Georgia, to Savannah on the coast. In this way you can follow, as I did, the track of Sherman's army in its famous march to the sea. But there are places far less afield than these. There is hardly any wilder country anywhere than in upper New York State. A tramp through New England is likely to be congenial to most Englishmen. The people are so much nearer to the English. Canada also presents enormous fields for pleasure tramping, or for tramping which is almost exploration. The far northwest especially is wild, and little traversed. Europe, however, has equally strong claims to those who tramp, being even more diversified than is America. The language difficulty is the chief drawback. There are 100 or so tongues. Customs and laws are also bewildering. Still, the best way to see the Pyrenees or the Alps is pack on back. The charming works of Hilaire Belloc on the path to Rome and the Pyrenees are memorable of excellent tramping in Europe. A pilgrimage from inn to inn in France, especially going south through the wine country, is utterly pleasant. One dispenses with a coffee pot in these parts. A litre bottle is better. Fill it with the vin de paix, wherever you go. A bottle of Chablis in the village of Chablis, a bottle of Nuit Saint-Georges in the village of Nuit Saint-Georges, a bottle of Pommard at Pommard, identifying the country by the wine of the wayside inns. It is well to taste and try what any countryside, town, or hostelry is famous for. Be it creole, gumbo, or stuffed peppers, be it even snails, even frogs' legs. I remember in younger days the disgust of the waiter in a little hotel opposite Chartres Cathedral, when I rejected a plateful of snails which, with a clatter, he had put before me. A flagon of red wine, a chunk of bread, and a plateful of Roman snails. I said, "No, take them away." The waiter shrugged his shoulders. Quel diable! If I didn't want the snails, why did I come to that hotel? Snails were their speciality. However, I confess now I have eaten snails. The first time was at Pont de Vaux, near Mâcon, of Burgundy fame. The snails came on as a third course at the Hôtellerie de la Renaissance, cleverly disguised, and before I knew it I was saying, "I like these, I wonder what they are." These were purveyed upon a silver tray, or nickel, I suppose. They had been taken out of their shells and put into tiny pots, one snail, one pot. There were a dozen or so tiny pots on the tray, each no more than half an inch across the top, and in each a snail floated in a little bath of melted butter and spice. There was a slender two-pronged fork, which looked like a toothpick, and you ate the snail with that. Very tasty, very novel. Perhaps that was how the Romans ate them. Perhaps in ancient Egypt they ate them in that way. These are the original flesh pots. Be that as it may, I felt much amused and intrigued, and turned with a friendly gesture to my bottle of local Macon. I was more pro-French after that, having got over a prejudice. I could no longer say, disgusting people, they eat snails. France is a delightful country for a spring escapade. Go south and stay in the country inns, and disenchant the northern seriousness. It is a great idea. Go out from Paris to Fontainebleau, where the birds are singing in choirs in the silvery lichen trees. You can sprawl at your length in the sun in May. It is cold sleeping out, but there are inns. You will walk amid wild daffodils and budding hyacinths. Summer is coming north to meet you at Yogny or Dignan. You can enter the Côte d'Or country and spectacular stone villages among green hills, from Dijon by red earth vineyards, whence the well-cut vines are sprouting an elemental eye-pulsating green. Your eyes need pulsating after the dreary north with its cities and industries. The vineyards have low stone walls, which incidentally make excellent seats for the wanderer on which to munch his bread and camembert and stand his bottle of Burgundy. You come to Bouin, a name on a bottle, on a wine list, now a place well established in your mind and heart. So also Pommard, Volnay, Messol, Nuits, Macon, to mention but a few. It is a longish distance, but another journey, or a continuation, might be from Lyon along the banks of the Rhone, or eastward to Lake Geneva and Switzerland. It is very hot on the Rhone, but there is an added interest in the old Roman cities you pass through them. Avignon might be your centre, and from Avignon there are delightful pilgrimages to the fountain of Vaucluse, where Petrarch and Laura met, to Tarascon, and by word for obscurity in France, to famous Arles and its amphitheatre. But certainly the most wild and delightful tramp would be over the mountains by compass to Caen, through untraversed and solitary Provence. This can be done in later summer, for though it is extremely hot on the Riviera, the whole way there is at a height, and one drops down to the coast by a precipitous road from the perfume factories of Grasse. Tramping expeditions of even more beauty can be made on the French side of the Pyrenees. In the country of the Basque, pious Catholics may be inclined to make for Lourdes, and will encounter the sick in body going for health, and perhaps coming in the opposite direction, rejoicing cripples who have been made whole. Whether credulous or incredulous, the tramp will find Lourdes a religious curiosity well worth approaching in the spirit of a true pilgrim on foot. A tramp from Biarritz to Carcassonne, across the ankle of the Franco-Iberian Peninsula, holds many picturesque sights of strange people and of feudal towns. But mountainous nature will rule the hearts of all those who come under the influence of the sublime. This is delightful country for sleeping out, provided mosquito netting be carried. Inns, however, are not so numerous, and one should be prepared to make one's own coffee or on one's own brushwood fire. Spain, despite some pleasant volumes recording walking tours, is really untouched. It is a remarkable country, and the people, the most conservative and delightful in Europe, look somewhat askance upon Bohemians. There are tens of thousands of beggars who are accepted as philosophically as flies in summer. But the man in tweeds with knapsack on his back is regarded as some sort of strange wild animal. One is almost bound to be called upon to explain oneself to the police, and to find oneself described officially as a vagrant. Jan and Cora Gordon, two delightful vagabonds, got over the difficulty by carrying guitars, and they were understood as itinerant musicians. In the end, because they played so well, they won over the affections of many sombre Spaniards. Among other tramping friends of mine, I ought to mention Mr. Forth, the tramping vicar of Southbourne, who has made several tours on foot in Spain and issues his impressions as supplements to his parish magazine. I often envied him his experiences. It was my impression in Spain that it is not wise to wear tweeds. Black is the accepted colour for all people. All respectable beggars wear black. On the other hand, state visits are also made in black. With one regard to the climate of Spain, it is easy to be deceived. It is much colder than most people think. Northern Spain is mostly elevated plateau, and is exposed to bitter winds in the spring. Andalusia, however, and the south generally is serene and warm, hot even, but subject to unpleasant dust storms. Incidentally, it may be mentioned that the easiest way to get to Spain is via Southampton and Gibraltar. The railway journey from France is apt to be very uncomfortable. After these two countries, northern Italy, Switzerland, and Germany come naturally to mind. Of these, by far the cheapest is northern Italy, and there more untrodden ground. It is well to take passports for Austria as well, so as to be free of the Austrian Tyrol if you wish to enter. Austria, however, as a result of the war, lost a great deal of magnificent territory to Italy, and there is plenty of room in the latter country. Southern Germany is, of course, very fine, and not inhospitable, though the cost of provisions have gone up prodigiously. Perhaps it would be remedied, as one remembers Germany in the old days as one of the cheapest countries for travel in the world. Bavaria is, however, still Bavaria, and if beer attract, the brown broth is as good as ever. The Bavarians were the only Germans who did not Gottstrafe England, America, and the rest, and they were quite pleasant neighbours. The Germans themselves are good walkers, love rucksacks, and the tramp will attract no unpleasant curiosity, as in Spain. Switzerland may be enjoy afoot. It is common ground for walkers of all nationalities, a League of Nations centre for those who love God's handiwork in nature. It is, however, a rendezvous for the lazier type of tourist, and the lounge lizard is apt to set the pace for all. It is dangerous to spend more than one night consecutively in one of the large hotels or tourist roundups. It is a desecration of opportunities to use them only for dancing and gentle promenades. The programme of the visitor to Switzerland is apt to be a little unambitious. People go with heaps of luggage and find themselves tied to it, returning inevitably to it even from delightful daily expeditions like cows from pasture. The end of a happy day should be the stepping stone to one still happier. A fortnight or 3 weeks spent going continuously with sunset and dawn, joined by your resting place in the hills, has a larger content than the equivalent days spent going out to a certain point and then returning to a hotel. Czechoslovakia is a country of athleticism, and one encounters goodwill there at every point. There is a good deal of delightful ground, especially in the Carpathians. It is rougher going than in France, but the people you meet are simpler. More rations needed to be carried, as villages are further apart and are apt to have less in them than one might imagine. Here are a few canned goods, but there is plenty of good fruit. An expedition well worth making is to Osherod, in the long, narrow strip of territory inhabited by the Carpathian Russians. As regards the rest of southern Europe, conditions are frequently difficult. The Balkans are bare and sun-beaten and largely uncivilized. There is plenty of scope for adventure, especially in Albania, where an armed guard is usually required. Dalmatia is extremely interesting, especially the primitive Croats living in the interior. But the country is mostly treeless and subject to the southern sun and the sirocco. Early morning is the best time for walking. It is often very cool, but there is little shelter from the noontide ardor. Spalato and Ragusa are excellent starting points, especially the former. Montenegro has very interesting people, and the country is obscure enough to please the stoutest adventurer. I have written considerably in my books concerning tramping in Russia and Siberia. I have been over many thousands of miles of Russia afoot. The happiest times were in the Caucasus, by the gorge of Daryl Road, over the Cross Path, or by the Rion Valley over Mamison, or on the Caucasian shore of the Black Sea. When it is too hot to live in a house, in a town, it is heaven on the mountains. Since the war and the revolution, the Caucasus has, unfortunately, become much more dangerous for travellers of all kinds. The tribes are warlike, and they have been badly treated by Bolsheviks and Europeans in general. Robbers are merciless. Pacification should, however, succeed within the next 10 years, and the Caucasus become more open again. Weapons are not of much use to tramp in these parts. If he carry a revolver, he should be secretive about it, for a revolver is a great lure. You are almost certain to be robbed if it is known that you have a revolver. For a revolver's sake, it is best to go unarmed and match intelligence against force when necessary. The native horseman will be found to be of a browbeating kind. carrying perchance several mortal weapons. It is best to meet them face to face, but smiling. Never let them get you scared. They may want to turn you back or force you to go work in their fields. But a smiling answer turneth away wrath, and it is well to keep them talking, and watch your chance to escape. It should be remarked that the scope for tramping is not great before the middle of May, or after the middle of October. The passes, the lowest of which is over 9,000 feet, fill up with snow. You get into whirling blizzards and lose the only trail. On Mamison especially, it is easy to go wrong, as it is extremely desolate. I crossed once before the snows had melted, an experience never to be forgotten or to be repeated. It is better in the Caucasus to provide for sleeping out. There are inns, dukkans, bedless, dirty, and you can obtain hospitality in the villages. But the guest is sacred only as long as he is under roof. Next morning, after an hour's grace wherein to hide his tracks, he may become the quarry of mine host. Villages, the native ulwi, may be entered by day, but it is safer to keep out of them. They do not possess much which cannot be found in the wayside inn. Provisions are very scarce. Such things as tea, sugar, bread, ham, generally unattainable. Eggs and a species of bread baked from millet seed are the commonest fare. The latter needs a good deal of red wine to wash even a small quantity down. It is called shuduk, and it is good for chickens. In the summer and autumn, wild fruits of many kinds abound. Strawberries, plums, grapes, and a number of species not known are sold in towns. The kizil, with its blood-like juice, is excellent boiled with plenty of sugar. Wild grapes make good fruit, but are inclined to blister the lips. There is an endless abundance of grapes upon the slopes of the Black Sea shore. The wine is heady, and is apt to put you to sleep in the noontide. It is better enjoyed in the evening, and it is marketed in skins, but is nonetheless good for coming out of a tight pig. The only other parts of Russia to compare with the Caucasus are the Crimea, the Urals, and the Altai. The delightful Crimea is all too limited in extent. It is very beautiful and possessed of a marvelously good air. It is more invigorating in the Crimea than in the Caucasus. It is also easier and safer tramping. It may take some time to recover from Bolshevism, but I dare say it is more delightful in desolation than it was in the days when it was the national pleasure ground of the Russian middle and upper classes. The Urals are tame beside the Caucasus, but they have a poetry of their own. The many lakes and little hills and birch forests make a welcoming land. One ought to know something of geology and mineralogy when tramping in the Urals. It is one of the most remarkable parts of Europe from a geological point of view. Every stone is interesting. The man who can combine geology and tramping is likely to have a very interesting experience, and one that might add to science in its results. The Ural region, it should be noted, is very extensive, and it is for the most part unprospected, especially northward. The chief difficulty in tramping becomes ultimately absent of people and of food. The gnats also swarm badly at night. The Altai is also more or less untrodden country, vast majestic mountain ranges separating Siberia from China, forested and beautiful, now rather difficult of access even for a starting point. Of course, I went to Russia not merely to tramp for tramping's sake, but in order to fill in life, which is limited at home. I found tramping to be the quickest way to a nation's heart. Many regions in which I have tramped I could not recommend for the pleasure. Thus, Archangel to Moscow, through the wet and gloomy forests of the north, or Tashkent to Vorony, across the Central Asian desert. That sort of expedition I would call student tramping. I recommend it heartily as a means of learning the truth about a country. No number of museums or handbook or columns or statistics can give you the sum reality obtained, quite simply and without particular effort, upon the road. I have not tramped in India or China or Japan, these problematical countries, but while there may not be much pleasure in footing it there, I believe it to be a way toward the understanding of their peoples.